Now today we're living in an age in which many respected experts are raising the alarm that the next wave of technological innovation could bring with it an explosion of joblessness. Now these are very contemporary concerns, but economic history teaches us that they're not new ones. Ever since the Industrial Revolution began in 18th century Britain, there's been worry that human labor would be rendered obsolete. And back in the 1950s and 1960s, when Carnegie Mellon was taking its current shape, there was a particularly intense wave of concern that automation might bring with it mass joblessness. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. raised this concern repeatedly in his speeches, and President Johnson impaneled the Blue Ribbon Commission to seriously consider the possibility that the waves of new technology then on the drawing board might lead to mass unemployment. Now, in the years since these concerns were raised, assembly lines and offices have become far more automated, as the progression of Moore's Law and the advance of software engineering brought unprecedented computing power onto factory floors and into the modern office. The great automation wave feared by Dr. King and President Johnson actually arrived, more or less on schedule. Yet it did not bring in its wake the mass unemployment that the leaders of the 50s and 60s had feared. This graph shows just how low and stable unemployment has been in the United States over more than a century of very substantial economic change. Recessions and the Great Depression caused unemployment to remain elevated for a few years, but that unemployment rate always came back down to something close to its long-run average of a little bit less than 5%. And today, the unemployment rate at 4.1% is lower than it was at the end of Dwight Eisenhower's presidency, and the labor force participation rate is actually higher than it was then. Over the long run, the U.S. economy has evidenced an impressive ability to absorb fairly staggering improvements in technology without running out of a demand for human labor. And while the waves of technology that are yet to come are indeed different from those that have come before, is it really reasonable to think that our factories and offices will change more over the next 10 years than they have over the past 100? Perhaps not. And so if the past is any guide, we need not fear an employment apocalypse. But if the past is any guide, there's something else that we need to fear. Because while the automation wave of the past half century did not bring mass unemployment, it did bring an explosion of inequality. These graphs break down wage trends over time by education level, and they show that a chasm has opened up between the fortunes of our best educated and least educated fellow citizens. The most educated Americans have continued to see their wages rise robustly since the early 70s. Today, the average Carnegie Mellon graduate with a bachelor's degree in computer science can earn well over $100,000 a year right out of college. The American dream works very well for these folks. But our less educated fellow citizens have seen their real incomes fall since the early 70s. And what many would regard as a middle-class standard of living is increasingly out of reach. The past half-century of technological progress has had a pronounced skill bias, and the best labor economists predict that the next wave of disruptive innovation will bring more of the same, furthering the growth of inequality that has placed such a strain on our national politics. Finding a way to make growth more inclusive is the central goal of the Center of the Future of Work, which I direct, and which will become an initiative in the New Block Center. Now, how might we do this? Well, labor economists tell us that the most important force driving increased inequality in the United States is the mismatch between the skills that our increasingly high-tech economy demands and the skills that our educational system supplies. But Carnegie Mellon has been a leader in the development of educational software called cognitive tutors. Cognitive tutors give students practice problems, figure out on the basis of the mistakes that students make what it is that they don't understand, and gives them focused practice in that material until they achieve mastery. For less than $100 per student per year, you can get a learning experience that's partly customized to the needs of each student. And in a large-scale randomized controlled trial involving more than 18,000 students in 147 schools across 7 states, this kind of software doubled the rate at which students learn Algebra 1. And it's not just the smart kids that did better. Every decile of the ability distribution registered sharp gains. Now imagine for a moment that we could double the amount of STEM learning that the average American acquires in the K through 12 grades. That would be revolutionary. That would be transformative. Unfortunately, adoption of this technology has been agonizingly slow, even after its efficacy has been demonstrated by scientific experiments, like the ones I've just described. Now, why is that? Well, there are over 13,000 public school districts in the United States, and in many of them, like the school district that educated me in rural Kentucky, Curricular decisions are being made by people that may not know exactly what a randomized controlled trial is, but what they do know is that every day their email inboxes are full of mostly exaggerated claims about new educational tools and procedures, and they really have no way of winnowing out the scientifically valid claims from the hype. They also know that if they invest big in a new technology and it fails, they could lose their jobs. But if they keep on doing the same thing that they're doing, even if it's not working well, they can probably keep their jobs. So under these circumstances, it's actually not surprising that adoption has been slow. But we can speed it up because we have disciplines like behavioral economics that help us understand how reasonably intelligent and very well-intentioned people can persistently make suboptimal decisions. And these same disciplines also teach us how fairly modest incentives with the right framing of evidence can actually have a very significant impact on the likelihood that decision makers like these will adopt new technologies. We're currently working to partner with local foundations, educational software providers, and educators to design the kind of behavioral interventions that can speed the adoption of this game-changing technology. Technological change helped create the inequality that is roiling our politics, but new technology coupled with smart public policy interventions could play a catalytic role in reversing these trends. Now, there are many other exciting opportunities I don't have time to talk about right now, but what I want to leave you with is a sense of the opportunity we have at Carnegie Mellon to help solve some of the greatest challenges facing 21st century America. We have some of the best computer scientists, the best engineers, and the best quantitative social scientists in the world on our campus, and we all coexist in a unique culture that facilitates interdisciplinary interaction. And because of our strong ties to local government and nonprofits and key employers in the Pittsburgh region, we have the opportunity to turn our neighborhood into a test bed for policy innovations that could be extended across the nation and around the world. I want to echo what Keith Block just said so eloquently. Prosperity and growth should not be the privilege of the few, but the common inheritance of all. We at Carnegie Mellon are working together to make that broader vision our reality.